back, ladies and gentlemen, to the She Knows Pro Football podcast. Once again, I'm Alice, aka the NFL Girl, and once again, I have my good friend Dominick from Fantasy Hot Read. Dominick, how you doing tonight?
I'm not doing too bad. The Saints looked awesome last night. Drew Brees broke another record, so I'm glad to see that. And now it's time for the Eagles to get blown out by the Cowboys this weekend.
And hopefully one of them or both of them, well, one of them is going to win, but hopefully one of them gets eliminated because I'm so sick of both of those teams.
Yeah, I think if the Eagles lose, then I think they're probably out. So,
huzzah. Let's hope for that. Well, you guys, we are done with the Thursday night matchups. This week, they're giving us not one, not two, but 3 Saturday matchups instead. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's start with our first Saturday night matchup. We got the 9-5 Houston Texans headed to Tampa Bay to face the 7-7 Buccaneers. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, this is a weird season for Tampa Bay. I mean, they're not a good team, yet they're 500. Jameis Winston is not a good quarterback, yet he's on track to break the all-time record for pass yardage. He's also on track to lead the league in touchdowns and lead the league in interceptions, which is hard to do. Obviously, he doesn't have Mike Evans anymore. He probably is not going to have Scott Miller in this game, who is the replacement for Mike Evans. He's also probably not going to have Chris Godwin in this game, so it's going to be down to the tight end duo of, Brate and O.J. Howard to go along with Rashad Perryman, the new greatest, receiver in the NFL. On the other side of the ball, Houston still has DeAndre Hopkins. They still have Watson, who's seemingly lately been throwing as many interceptions as, Jameis Winston. With that being said, they are the better team here. Their defense is better, even though it's not all that great. But Tampa Bay against the pass game is just god-awful, even without Vernon Hargreaves. So I do have to give this one to Houston. They're still in line for, the division. I think they have to win this game to stay on top of Tennessee if Tennessee wins their game. So I think they're going to go into Tampa Bay and win this early Saturday game.
Tampa Bay is one of those teams that you can never quite figure out, even with the addition of having Bruce Arians there as their head coach. You figured there would be like some type of big turnaround for Jameis and didn't actually come into fruition. Now, here's the thing with Jameis. He's not terrible. He's just not great. He's going to throw you interceptions. If you have him on your fantasy team, he's killed you a couple of weeks where he threw a couple of interceptions and then he turned around and threw 3 or 4 touchdowns in that same game. This game is going to be a little bit more difficult for him because of the loss of his 2 receivers now at this point, because we had already lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin most likely isn't going to play. Their running game has, as we've talked about repeatedly, is always a question mark from week to week. Never know who's going to start between Rojo and Peyton Barber, and neither one has stood out this season. If you have either one of them, you've been disappointed, but they still managed to keep getting wins. Meanwhile, the Texans, they're trying to stay ahead in their division. They're only up by 1 game. They looked really good last week. I love seeing what Deshaun Watson is able to do. He was able to get it to Kenny Stills last week, which was a surprise to me. So, we got Kenny Stills there. We got Will Fuller there. He still has Nuke there. Their run game is a little inconsistent, but they do actually have one there. And I saw Duke Johnson get a few plays last week. I'm like you. I definitely feel like Texans are going to get the win. They're just a slightly better team, and they are definitely need to try and stay ahead of the Titans this week. So I'm giving this one to the Texans, even though they're playing there in Tampa Bay. Next up, we got the 10-4 Buffalo Bills headed to New England to face the 11-3 Patriots. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, the Patriots looked semi-good last week. It was mostly defense against the Bengals, which is surprising to say because their offense should have done something. It really didn't. Buffalo played good against the Steelers on Sunday night. They came out with the win. The Patriots, though, the last time they played a home game, they lost their 21-game win streak at home to the Chiefs. They're angry about that. They're probably doubly mad that Buffalo actually thinks they're on par with them and has actually given them the biggest challenge that they've had in the division in about 15 years. With that said, this is going to be a very low-scoring defensive struggle. I think the over-under right now is like 38, and I can see it going under that. Buffalo normally does go under. Both these defenses are outstanding, but I think that just with the Bills being a top 4 defense, the Patriots being a top 2 defense, that's the slight difference here for the Patriots. So I do think that the Patriots are going to win an ugly game here in Foxborough.
So these two teams faced each other early in the season, and it was a real defensive battle. It was a really good game, and it was surprising because a lot of people expected the Bills to get blown out, and they didn't because the Bills' defense is just that good. And New England's offense isn't that great this season. I know it's Tom Brady. You expect more out of him. You expect more out of Julian Edelman. You expect more out of Sony Michel. You really expect more out of this offense. It is not that offense that is carrying them right now. It is that impressive defense. They were looked impressive again last week, but again, considered a competition. They were facing the Bengals. The Bills defense, again, these are two defenses, as you said, where the Patriots defense is in the top 2. Bills defense isn't far behind. They're still within the top 5. These are two really, really great defenses. These are two really, really mediocre offenses. That being said, this is going to be a tough defensive battle, but they are there in Gillette Stadium. And the Patriots, like you said, are pissed that they lost to the Chiefs. They are not trying to lose to Josh Allen there after they've already lost to Patrick Mahomes. It's not happening. I definitely see the Patriots getting a win there at home, but it's going to be a low scoring, maybe 13-10, 19-10, something around that type of score in that game. Next up, we got the 8-6 Los Angeles Rams headed to San Fran to face the 11-3 49ers. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, both these teams had shocking results last week. I mean, I know you picked Dallas to win. I had the Rams winning, but I didn't think either of us thought it would be a blowout as the way it was. On the other hand, San Francisco, I thought they would handle Atlanta. I just thought their defense was going to be better, and it wasn't. This is a division game, which is always tough. I think the Rams are going to come out here and play hard. We have to see if Richard Sherman is going to be back for this game or not. Their defense is very injured right now. It's not the defense that it was at the beginning of the year, even though it's still ranked number 1 in the league. With that said, Jimmy Garoppolo is not playing, didn't play that well last week. He played great against New Orleans, as we know, but last week he and the rest of his entire team, other than George Kittle, had a down game. The Rams are going to come into this game hungry. They have to win out and hope that Minnesota loses and they can actually still make the playoffs, which is shocking. So I think they're going to come out and they're going to be able to do that. And although it's going to be an upset because I think San Francisco is a great team. Obviously, I'm a Saints fan, so I'm hoping for this result, but I honestly do think that the Rams are going to be able to come in here and sneak one out against the 49ers at home.
The 49ers took a shocking loss last week. There's no way anybody picked the Falcons to beat the 49ers. You're a liar if you say you did, because the Falcons haven't been looked good this season. And so for the 49ers, who have the top-ranked defense, to take that L, it was super surprising. That being said, this week they are going against the Rams. The Rams looked atrocious in that game against the Cowboys last week. I don't know what's going on with them. Again, we're still having the same issues with they're not utilizing Gurley up to the full potential that we expected out of him before the season started. Jared Goff is Jared Goff. He's going to throw you picks. You just have to kind of know that going in. But he still has Cooper Kupp there, who he has that great dynamic relationship with. I expect the Rams to play a much better game than they did last week against the Cowboys. I expect the 49ers to play a much better game than they played against the Falcons last week. But the 49ers are playing at home, and they're pissed that they took that L last week. So are the Rams, but I feel like with the defense that the 49ers have, they're going to be able to shut down Jared Goff and that limited running game that they have going with Todd Gurley. I personally am giving this one to the 49ers, and I'm sorry to do that to you because I know you love your Saints, but I just really feel like the 49ers are not going to take 2 losses in a row, and definitely not to a division rival, and especially not the Rams.
Hey, that's all right, because if Seattle wins this week and they win next week against the 49ers, or even if they end up with the same record and Seattle wins the division, then the Saints get the number 1 seed because they have the tiebreaker over Seattle. But if the 49ers win the division, then the 49ers get the 1 seed.
Hey, either way, Saints are going to be in it, and I have no worries about them whatsoever. Next up, we got the 5-9 Jacksonville Jaguars headed to Atlanta to face the 5-9 Falcons. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, don't get it twisted. Jaguars did not win that game last week. The Oakland Raiders lost it, which is surprising to see in their last game in Oakland. Coming back home, I know Atlanta won the game last week, so a lot of people are going to think they're going to come down to a low this week, like a crash game. I don't think that's going to happen. They have been playing a lot better, especially since their bye week. They started the season 1-7. They beat the Saints and the 49ers both after their bye week. This should be another semi-easy win for them. Leonard Fournette has not looked good in recent weeks. Gardner Minshew has done a little bit for the team, but not enough. Chris Conley may be back this week, but we're not sure. But their offense is just bad. Their defense, when they first got rid of Jalen Ramsey, they were doing good, and it was kind of an addition by subtraction. Now they've just fallen off a cliff, and they're just doing absolutely awful. With that said, and this game being in the Georgia Dome, I think that Matt Ryan is going to light up this Jacksonville team. I think Julio Jones is going to have another touchdown this week since he had his first 2 last week since week 3. And I think that Devontae Freeman might actually get in on the action here, and I do think Atlanta is going to win this game by probably a couple touchdowns.
So, like you said, Jacksonville got a win. It wasn't an impressive win. It was against the Raiders, who are not a good team and who showed just how bad they can be. That was their opportunity to close out that stadium well, and they didn't. But that being said, Jaguars, I like Leonard Fournette, but I haven't seen enough out of him this season. And I would love to see that connection that I saw earlier in the season between Gardner Minshew and DJ Chark, but that didn't pan out. So I don't have a lot of expectation. They're already out of the playoff contention at this point. I don't expect a lot more out of them. Maybe one more win. They're headed to Atlanta. The Falcons had an impressive win last week against the 49ers, which no one expected. I know I didn't predict that one. And we finally saw Julio Jones get a touchdown. The other thing that has helped them in recent weeks is the return, in the last 2 weeks especially, has been the return of Austin Hooper. That is Matt Ryan's like go-to, his shutdown person that he goes to. And so it was good seeing him back, and it's good seeing them being able to get those first downs, if not the touchdowns. And we finally saw Devontae Freeman, not last week, but the week before, get a touchdown. So they have the pieces in place to get a couple more wins with, just these last two games. I believe they could potentially win both of them. And that starts with this one. They're there at home. I definitely feel like Atlanta's going to get the win in this game. Next up, we got the 12-2 Baltimore Ravens headed to Cleveland to face the 6-8 Browns. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, this one is 10-point spread for Baltimore. I don't know if they're going to cover that because obviously they are going to be very mad though right now because obviously when these teams played earlier in the year, Cleveland trounced them. It was the worst loss up for Baltimore this year. They lost, I think it was like 45-6 or 45-10 or something like that. It was just a bad game by Baltimore. I don't think it's going to be that way this week, even though it is in Cleveland this week. Lamar Jackson is playing on a different level right now. There are some concerns in this game that we'll get to when we talk about the fantasy later on, but I do think that no matter what, Baltimore is going to have enough to win this game, and I don't know if they'll cover the spread, but they're definitely going to win this game.
So at this point, Cleveland's no longer, Cleveland's still kind of sort of in it, but not really. And at this point, what they're really playing for is Freddie Kitchens' job, which I can tell you right now is not going to happen. Freddie Kitchens is out when this season is over. That's just a wrap. And the fact that he came out and said, he tried to clarify it today, but he originally came out and said like he doesn't really care about whether or not he's back next season or whatever. Yeah, you do, but you're not going to be there anyway. This team is a hot mess, and it's so ridiculous. Rumors are out there now that originally it was just OBJ was asking other teams to come get him. Now it's coming out that Jarvis as well has been asking other teams to come get him. This is so ridiculous. This team is just a hot ass mess. Meanwhile, the Ravens have been going on a tear, and they're now at 12-2. They are far ahead of every other team in that division. They look so good. Lamar Jackson is most likely going to win MVP just based on the way he's been playing these last few weeks, especially. I don't expect this to be a good game. I really don't. It's going to be a revenge factor. Ravens need to prove that was a fluky win, that they were just caught off guard in that game, and that they're going to beat the hell out of the Browns in this game. So I'm not expecting Cleveland to get organized. It's just a complete dumpster fire over there at this point. So definitely taking the Ravens in this one, and expect it to be a high-flying game for Lamar Jackson. I feel like they're going to blow out the Browns just as payback for the game earlier in the season. Next up, we got the 11-3 New Orleans Saints headed to Tennessee to face the 8-6 Titans. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, I know the Titans lost last week against Houston, but they're still a very good team. This should be a very high-scoring game as well. I believe the over-under right now is 50, and there's a good chance this game goes over. I know the Saints don't play nearly the way they do at home as they do on the road, which is tough to think. But I think with Alvin Kamara not playing as good as he has been, Latavius Murray has been picking up the slack. Michael Thomas has been a beast this year. He had another 12 catches on Monday night for a touchdown and 130 yards. Drew Brees was amazing. He was 29 of 30 for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns on Monday night. It was just incredible to see. This defense is playing out of their mind right now as well. I think they're going to do enough, especially with Derrick Henry having a slight hamstring injury possibly that could limit him. I don't think that Tennessee has enough in the rest of their offense to match up with the Saints, and the defense of the Saints is outstanding. So I do think the Saints are going to get the win here, but it's probably going to be a pretty close game.
So Titans took a loss last week, but you can see that they have some really good pieces in place. I like what I'm seeing out of A.J. Brown. I know that sounds biased, maybe because I have A.J. Brown on my fantasy team. I love what I see out of Derrick Henry because I personally love Derrick Henry. I've met him. He's a sweetheart, huge. And it's good to see Ryan Tannehill getting another shot with a different team and actually playing well this year, so, which kind of is a more reflection on maybe Dolphins should have hung on to him. We'll never know that for sure, but I definitely love what I'm seeing out of him this season playing with the Titans. That being said, they're facing New Orleans Saints, who had a damn impressive win on Monday night against the Colts. And it's that same, AFC South division, the NFC South division facing one another. That usually doesn't work out well for the AFC South team. I don't expect it to work out well this time. Saints are just playing out of their mind. Drew Brees looked so phenomenal on Monday night, and him and Michael Thomas hooking up this year, it's on another level. Admittedly, Kamara's numbers have been off, but you see that Latavius Murray is picking up the slack there. So they're not having much of a fall off in the run production. Just on Alvin Kamara's numbers are we seeing a decline, but again, where he's declined, Latavius Murray's kind of picked up. So the run game is still solid. This defense is super solid. Absolutely see this team being able to, get into the playoffs and look impressive when it comes that time. So I definitely don't see the Titans being able to pull off a win, even though they're at home. I'm definitely giving this one to the Saints. Next up, we got the 5-9 Carolina Panthers headed to Indianapolis to face the 6-8 Colts. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, we have the Fighting Will Greers coming ahead to Indianapolis. Just a little quick info, the Indianapolis defense is a great fantasy play here, as well as Marlon Mack. Carolina has not been able to stop a running back at all this year, so look for both of those as great plays. For Carolina, we don't know what to expect from Will Grier. We do know he's going to throw the ball. He was part of a big aerial attack at Florida. He was part of an even bigger aerial attack under Dana Holgorsen at West Virginia for his final year there. Even though they did get stomped by Alabama, but that was his own fault for mentioning to Nick Saban that he kissed his daughter at a camp one time, so that was his own fault. But besides that, Will Grier, we don't know anything about him. We do know he likes to throw the ball. He has DJ Moore there, who should have a good game against this Colts defense, and obviously we know we're not going to sit Christian McCaffrey, but other than that, they don't have a whole lot here. Their defense is awful this year, so I do think this is actually going to be a Colts win. I know they're not really playing well right now. They're coming off 2 losses in a row, but I think they are going to get this win here at home in Indianapolis.
These are two, I don't want to say terrible teams, but they're two blah teams. There's nothing spectacular about either one of these teams. Whatever hopes I had for Jacoby Brissett hasn't really come fully to fruition. And not that he's playing terrible. Part of that is his running game hasn't done a damn thing for him this season. Marlon Mack's numbers have been off. I understand some of what's going on has been injuries and his O-line has been hurt and things of that nature, but it's not enough going on with that offense. Even with the defense playing as well as they've been playing. I love seeing what Darius Leonard can do on that defense. Panthers are relying on Will Grier. We don't know, like you said, we don't know exactly what to expect out of that. We don't know how that's going to work out. If I were you and you have Christian McCaffrey and you're in your championship, definitely please start him, because they're mainly going to have, I really feel like it's going to be a lot of running the ball with Christian McCaffrey this week. Not that Grier won't have DJ Moore there, but just expect a lot of handing the ball off to Christian McCaffrey and seeing what he can do. And that kid is impressive, so he should definitely get good numbers in this game against the Colts defense. But that being said, they're playing there in Indianapolis. I feel like the Colts have just enough to be able to get it done there at home, and they have to stay on pace with the Titans if they hope to stay in contention. I mean, they're 6-8, not saying that they have much shot, but there's always still a hope. That being said, I'm giving this one to the Colts. They're at home. I feel like they got just enough to be able to get it done. Next up, we got the battle of the losers. The Cincinnati Bengals at 1-13 are headed to Miami to face the 3-11 Dolphins. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, we'll make this one short and sweet. This is a battle for the top pick in the NFL draft. I think Miami's actually playing to win. I think at this point, Cincinnati has their win. They're playing for the Joe Burrow sweepstakes. So I do think that Cincinnati is going to falter in the heat of Miami, and I do think Miami's going to be able to win this one. And actually, Fitzpatrick should have a probably very good game in this one, especially with Devontae Parker coming back and playing good last week. He should have another good game this week against Cincinnati.
Bengals are just a god-awful team. They're just terrible all the way around. There's questions on decisions that they made as far as AJ Green is concerned earlier in the season. We don't know what all is going on there. They had benched Andy Dalton, then they brought Andy Dalton back. The only thing they got out of that was a win. They're just a terrible team on both sides of the ball. They're hard to watch. They're going to face the Dolphins. Dolphins aren't a great team. Dolphins, though, have more of an excuse. They have more pieces that they were trying to rebuild. They did the fire sale and got rid of everyone and still managed to eke out 3 wins so far. So that's saying something there. It's saying that you could see that they have potential with having Ryan Fitzpatrick there and with keeping Devontae Parker there. This team has so much that they can potential and things that they could build on for the future if they bring in the right pieces. It won't be Joe Burrow because he's definitely going to the Bengals, but there's other pieces that they can bring in. I'm definitely giving this one to the Dolphins because the Bengals just aren't going to get it done. I told you they'd get 1 win this season. They have that 1 win. That's going to be it for them. Look for them at draft time because that's the next time that they'll be relevant. Next up, we got the 8-6 Pittsburgh Steelers headed to New York to face the 5-9 Jets. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, I know Duck had a bad game. I know it was against the great Bills defense. Against the Jets here, we don't know if Jamal Adams is going to be active for this game or not. If he is, it's going to make a world of difference. Even without him, I think Pittsburgh, I know they're still technically in the playoffs right now, but it's going to be tough for them to stay there. It's going to be a very tough game in New York. I know that Jets aren't really playing for much right now other than self-respect, but I do think that Sam Darnold's going to have a decent game here. Le'Veon Bell, obviously, this year, 2019 is like the revenge narrative year, so I think this could be another revenge game narrative for him. He's going to want to show up the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think he's going to have actually a pretty good chance to do that this week because the Steelers' pass defense is amazing, but their run defense is not as good. But I do think that the Jets are going to be able to figure out a way to pull one out here.
The Steelers they're not terrible. Again, this is one of those teams that are like mediocre. But we saw that Duck can get flustered. And when Duck gets flustered, Duck throws picks. And that really, really hurt them last week. The Steelers, they have things that they're going to have to work on for this next season. We needed to see more out of James Conner. We didn't. Juju, we expected some kind of chemistry that was going to happen with Mason Rudolph, and it didn't. And it came into fruition a little bit with Duck Hodges, and then it didn't. They've got so much that they need to work on this offseason. I don't think they're going to make it into the playoffs, and if they do, they'll back in and get beaten in the first round. Jets, like you said, they're out of contention, but they're playing for pride, and they really want to get that win. Le'Veon Bell especially wants to get that win to prove his, former team that they made a, terrible decision in not signing him to a long-term deal. That's fine. Sam Darnold has good games. He has some terrible games, but he has a connection with Robbie Anderson that I really like to see, and the Jets have a pretty decent defense. So they're there at home. I just feel like I'm like you. I think I'm going to take the Jets in this one. I don't expect it to be a really high-flying game because I expect both Duck and Sam Darnold to throw picks in this game. Expect it to be low-scoring, but I really feel like the Jets can pull off a win in this one. Next up, we got another battle of terrible teams. The 3-11 New York Giants are headed to Washington to face the 3-11 Redskins. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, this one's going to be pretty simple. I know that the Giants have been playing a little bit better lately. Especially their run defense has been pretty good since they made some adjustments in the middle of the year. But Adrian Peterson right now, with him being there and Darius Geis not being there, and we know that the Redskins, all they really want to do is run the ball. And when you have Dwayne Haskins behind center, that's probably the best thing for you. I think they're going to be able to slow this game down. Adrian Peterson could have over 100 yards in this game. And I do think that Washington's going to be able to pull this one out at home against the Giants.
These are two really, really terrible teams this year. Whatever we expected to see out of Danny Dimes never came into fruition, and therefore they went back to Eli. And then Eli was throwing picks, but Eli did manage to get a win last week. And that really, you kind of had a really good feeling like that was the cementing win that he needed. Washington, meanwhile, like you said, their best bet is to ground and pound behind Adrian Peterson. You saw what he could do, even at his quote-unquote advanced age. age. You still see that when he gets it going, he can really get it going. I don't know. I think that the Redskins could get the win. They're there at home, but I really feel like the Giants, after getting that win last week, with having Eli perform the way that he did, I really feel like Giants are playing for pride. They're playing for Eli at this point. They want to send him out, hopefully at least with a couple of wins. So I'm going to take the Giants here. I know they're playing in Washington, but I really feel like the Giants are, like I said, at this point, they're just playing for Eli, and I feel like they're going to try and get, at least one more win for him.
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody talks about players getting old and how old they are and stuff. And, growing up, we always felt the same way. And at this point in my life, the only players in the NFL that are older than me are Tom Brady and Adam Vinatieri.
Yeah, I can't even say that. So, yeah. Next up, we got the 3-10-1 Detroit Lions headed to Denver to face the 5-9 Broncos. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, the Broncos looked bad in a snowstorm in Kansas City last week. Kansas City, as much as everybody talks about how bad their defense is, their pass defense is very, very good. It's been number one for the past month and a half. So it was just tough to see Courtland Sutton not do anything last week. I didn't really expect him to do anything. It was the first time this year in the 3 games that he started that Drew Lock did not go for over 300 yards. That's going to change this week. The pass offense of Detroit sucks. They're 31st against the pass. They're 18th against the run. But that 18th number is kind of deceiving as well because people are throwing so much on them that when they do run the ball, they're just gashing them as well. So you can do anything you want to on this team. And I think the Broncos are going to do anything they want to on this team. And it's not going to be a good game. It's not going to be a close game. It's just going to be an ugly game, not even, physical ugly. It's just going to be an ugly football game. And I wouldn't want to watch it. So I feel sorry for the people in the Denver and the Detroit market that have to watch it. But I'm going to take Denver in this one.
Denver took a nasty L last week, but they were playing there in Kansas City at Arrowhead. I didn't even predict them to win because I'd never expect them to get the win there in Arrowhead, and I'm always surprised a few times that they do. So wasn't surprised that they took a butt kicking last week. The Lions do not look good at this point. Too many injuries, too many holes, not enough out of that defense. Really think that the Broncos are going to get a needed win for Drew Lock because after last week and as terrible as he looked, he needs kind of another confidence booster, headed into the end of the season, into the off season, so the team can decide whether or not what they're going to pick is another quarterback for next season or if they're going to stick with Locke and have him be the future quarterback there. So I'm like you, I'm definitely going to take the Broncos in this one. They should especially be able to use that ground game behind Lindsey and Freeman. So definitely expecting the Broncos to get the win. They're back at home, and I expect them to win at home. Next up, we got the 6-8 Oakland Raiders headed to Los Angeles to face the 5-9 Chargers. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, both these teams are bad. Derek Carr is not a good quarterback. He's a just average quarterback. He plays bad on the road. He plays bad at home. The Chargers' pass defense is amazing this year. They're third in the league right now, and they just got Derwin James back a couple weeks ago to make them even better. They're going to be able to stop them. They're going to be able to stop no matter what the Raiders want to do. They're going to be able to stop them. The problem with the Chargers last week is they had 7 turnovers, which was terrible. Phillip Rivers is playing god-awful, but even he can beat this Oakland Raiders defense, so I do think that the Chargers are going to win this pseudo home game.
Both of these teams coming off a loss, and like you said, both these teams are terrible. The one that's a little least terrible is the Chargers, because the Chargers at the end of the day still have Phillip Rivers. The Chargers at the end of the day still have Melvin Gordon. The Chargers at the end of the day still have Keenan Allen, and they have Austin Eckler. They have good pieces there. Not saying that the Raiders don't have pieces, but their quarterback is Derek Carr. And Derek Carr may be $100 million man. He is not playing like $100 million man. And that was obvious last week when they disappointed those Oakland fans in getting that L in their last game there in the Oakland Coliseum. That was just disgusting. I do not expect anything good out of the Raiders. I don't expect anything good out of them going into this game, facing that Chargers defense. Yeah, the Chargers offense has its issues and can't always get it done, and Rivers has been throwing some picks lately, but the Chargers defense has looked pretty stout. And so it's going against the Raiders and that terrible passing game, I really expect to see a good game out of the Chargers. So I'm like you. They're at home. I'm going to give this one to the Chargers. Next up, we got the 7-7 Dallas Cowboys headed to Philly to face the 7-7 Eagles. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, I'm from the Philadelphia area. I do like the Eagles. Unfortunately, Dallas, they have more talent on their team right now, especially with Alshon Jeffrey and everybody else on the offense being hurt. Obviously, Zach Ertz is going to be the best player on the field besides Ezekiel Elliott, but that's not going to be enough for the Eagles. Carson Wentz has been throwing a lot of touchdowns lately, but he doesn't really have anybody to throw touchdowns to anymore. It's right now it's down to Greg Ward, J-Jaw, and then the tight ends. It's going to be very tough here for the Eagles to do anything. That being said, it's always different in division games than it is outside division games. We know that the Dallas Cowboys crushed the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. The last time they played it was 37-10. The Eagles are playing for their lives here. Both teams are playing for their lives. If the Eagles win this game and they win next week, they're in the playoffs. Dallas wins this week, then they're in the playoffs no matter what, because the best the Eagles can do is tie them, and then they would lose the tiebreaker. So if Dallas wins, they're in. If the Eagles win and then win next week, they're in. This is a tough game. It's probably the toughest one of the week for me. We know that Dak Prescott's good. Amari Cooper has not been doing anything as of late, but the Eagles secondary, which started bad, got better, and then is now bad again, can make a lot of people better than they actually are. But I'm going to take the emotions into here, and I do think that the Eagles are going to be able to do something just because their fans are there, and I do think they're going to win this game.
So this right here is the battle that we've been, I guess, waiting for. I'm not an NFC East fan, so I actually could care less. But this is the battle for who is going to win eventually win the NFC East most likely. So the Eagles win it. They win next week. They're in. The Cowboys, they just need this win. So they're going to come in there fired up because they know if they beat the Eagles, that's a wrap. They're going to be in. They're going to be the NFC East, winner. They're going to win the division. They've got better pieces on that offense. Not only do you have Dak Prescott, you got Ezekiel Elliott. And the team defense has been playing, well, they're 7-7. So obviously they've had some really good games and they've had some really mediocre and in some cases terrible games. Philly, their main problem is on that offense, and 99% of that is all because of injury. Literally, they've lost pretty much every single receiver, whether it was for the season or for a few games, and it's really hurt them. Hell, they've had to bring in they had to sign Jay Ajayi at one point because their running game was depleted. You're now seeing something out of Miles Sanders, which is really good. That they always are still going to have Zach Ertz there, and they have Dallas Goedert there. They're going to have to lean heavily on them and Miles Sanders in this game. This is going to be, I'm like you, I'm having a tough time with this because I expect this to be a really, really close matchup, but neither one has a great defense. So I expect a good amount of scoring in this. I want to say the Eagles, but I really, as much as I don't like the Cowboys, I just feel like the Cowboys are going to get the win in this one because they know that they need this so badly. In particular, they are trying to save Jason Garrett's behind. And so I feel like to play for him, to get them at least into the playoff contention, they absolutely have to get this one. So I feel like the Cowboys are going to come in here and get the win. Next up, we got the 4-9-1 Arizona Cardinals headed to Seattle to face the 11-3 Seahawks. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, I don't even know if we really need to talk about this one. The Cardinals are a terrible team, although they look good last week with Kenyon Drake. They cannot cover the tight end, so expect a big day from Jake Hollister in this one. Russell Wilson is a great quarterback. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If it weren't for Lamar Jackson, he would probably be the MVP this year. I know a lot of people think he could be the MVP anyway, although it's not going to happen, but he's going to be up there. Chris Carson has the backfield all to himself now with Rashad Penny being out. Tyler Lockett is a great receiver. He showed it again last week that when he's healthy, he's actually a very good receiver. He's another week healthier, so he should have a big game this week. DK Metcalf could have a big game as well. Larry Fitzgerald does not play good on the road. He hasn't played good at all this year. But for some reason, Kyler Murray is a running quarterback. The Seattle Seahawks, the times that they have lost games and they've had trouble are against teams that have running quarterbacks. And I don't know why it's a hunch. I think that Seattle may be looking ahead to next week's game against San Francisco. I do think that the Cardinals are going to go in there and give Seattle a game, and I do think that the Cardinals are actually going to pull this one out.
Seattle and the Cardinals come in off of wins, with the Cardinals win actually being the more impressive of the two, clearly, because it was unexpected. And what we saw really was Kenyon Drake go off last week. 4 touchdowns, my goodness, that was not something I expected, / I also didn't want it. That's just a side note. But we also saw what Kyler Murray can do when he gets going and he starts scrambling. Again, we're not seeing a lot of production out of his receivers these last couple of weeks. Larry Fitzgerald really isn't doing anything. I didn't really see anything out of Christian Kirk, but I guess mainly because they were really leaning heavily on the run game because we had Kyler scrambling and we had Kenyon Drake just running all over the place. They're headed to Seattle, though. Let's get it clear. The 12s are going to be behind the Seahawks, and the Seahawks are trying to stay on top, or at least, right there with San Francisco. They really need this win. They did lose. Their biggest loss, unfortunately, this week was the loss of Josh Gordon, which I was sad to see. But even with the loss of Josh Gordon, who only was like a slot receiver, come on now, you got Tyler Lockett and you got DK Metcalf. Their run game has been consistent behind Chris Carson. I'm not worried about this team. I do not believe, as much as I like the Cardinals, as much potential as I can see in Kyler Murray and what this team can do, I'm not expecting them to go up to Seattle and be able to pull off some miraculous win. I'm definitely taking the Seahawks in this one. Next up, we got the 10-4 Kansas City Chiefs headed to Chicago to face the 7-7 Bears. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, the Bears got hot for a while. It was nice while it lasted. Mitch Trubisky looked good, and everybody was saying, see, I told you he's a good player, but it was against bad teams. The Chiefs are not a bad team. As I said earlier, they have one of the best pass defenses in the league right now, especially over the past month and a half. Patrick Mahomes actually plays better on the road than he does in Kansas City. This game is in Chicago, another outdoor stadium. The defense for Chicago is good, but they're not great. Tyreek Hill could have a field day here. Their run game is not really much of anything, but the pass game is going to be on point here. I think for both teams it's going to be on point. So I do expect a little bit of a high-scoring game, but that the Chiefs are going to win it.
The Chiefs, one of the things that they did this past week, because earlier in the season, we were criticizing their defense because their defense really wasn't doing anything. And all of a sudden, these last few weeks, they decided that they're going to start playing defense. Kudos for them. So in this past off week, what did they decide to do? Let's go ahead and pick up Terrell Suggs. Wow. Now, Terrell Suggs is a little older. He isn't probably going to have the kind of, numbers that, a little bit younger, pass rusher would have or whatever. But just the addition, just having him there is going to rally that defense. So I expect the Chiefs defense to play a little better this week, but I still expect a lot out of Patrick Mahomes. And he has Tyreek Hill there. And he has the best tight end in the league and Travis Kelce there. They're going to go into Chicago and they're going to give hell to these Bears. The Bears are at 7-7. Meaning they're a mediocre team. In their wins, they've had some decent wins, but nothing that outstanding. And their losses have been ridiculous how badly they lose. This defense on paper before the season started was expected to be very, very good, and they did not live up to that hype. Some of that was, injuries, in particular when they had lost Akeem Hicks. At this point, they're just not living up to the expectations we have. I would like to pick the Bears because they're at home, but I do not see this Bears offense being able to really get past what that Chiefs defense has been doing these last few weeks. And the Chiefs have a much, much better offense as far as I'm concerned. So I'm definitely giving this one to the Chiefs and expect to be a high scoring game. Maybe not necessarily a blowout, but at least by 2 touchdowns, I'd say. And last up, we got the 11-3 Green Bay Packers headed to Minnesota to face the 10-4 Vikings. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, I really like the Packers. Aaron Rodgers may be my favorite player in the NFL right now. That said, Aaron Jones is playing good as well, but they're a fraudulent 11-3 team. The past couple weeks, they started blowing out teams, and then they almost let them back in at the end of the game. They can't do that against Minnesota. Yes, this is a primetime game, and Kirk Cousins is not as good in primetime games, but coming off a game last week where they blew out the Chargers, and a lot of that had to do with the 7 turnovers by the Chargers, they have to hope that Dalvin Cook is back for this game. They're not sure if he is going to be back or not. If he's not back, then I don't think they have any chance, but as long as he's there, and luckily they do have an extra day to get rest here since it is a Monday night game. If Dalvin Cook is there, then the Vikings are going to win this game. If Dalvin Cook is not there, then they're going to lose the game.
Okay, good way to be committal there. Packers and the Vikings are both coming in off of wins last week. Packers, I love this season. We saw that even when his top receiver goes down, we saw that Aaron Rodgers can learn to adapt and play with his other receivers, which was good to see. And then he got Devontae Adams back, so we didn't have to worry about that. And they looked even better. And we've seen Aaron Jones really be able to step up. And that running game has looked really good. This is a really, really, really good team. Now, that's not to take anything away from the Vikings. Kirk Cousins Evans had to be called out earlier in the season, and after he got called out, he really started putting his game together. And we saw what his connection that he's been able to have with Stephon Diggs over these last few weeks. They've had a good running game in Dalvin Cook, but again, with the question mark there of whether or not he's going to be in the game, that kind of hurts them because they really need the production that he can do. They need his numbers there on the field. I want to pick the Vikings. I know I say that, but I really feel like the Packers are playing for something. They're really trying to take over this division, and they're also not just take over this division, they also are really trying to show that they have the fortitude to get into these playoffs and make a run all the way up to the Super Bowl. So I'm giving this one to the Packers. I really feel like that they have an advantage in this game in that they don't have question marks at their run game as of right now. So I'm definitely giving this one to the Packers. Well, that's all our matchups for this week. Dominic, give me a survivor pool pick for anyone that's still remaining.
Yeah, hopefully there's one or two of you that still are remaining here. This is a tough week. I think I'm going to have to go with the Patriots over the Bills, although you probably used the Patriots before. So one that I really like, and I think it could be the easiest pick, is the Broncos over the Lions.
So I'm going to go out on a limb. This is going to amaze you. And if you pick this, you're crazy. But I'm going to say take the Giants this week. I doubt very seriously if you're taking the Giants at any point at this season, but I definitely feel like the Giants at this point are playing for Eli, and they're going to want to get that win over the Redskins to beat a division foe. So take the Giants this week. That's going to be a lot for me. And Dominic, for those that are in the championship, give me one start and one sit in fantasy.
All right, for the starts, I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to give you 8 words. Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Cortland Sutton, Phillip Lindsay. Start all of your Broncos against the Lions. The Lions are terrible, and the Broncos should have a field day, especially for fantasy. As for a sit, I know you probably don't have any better options, but coming off a week where you only had 2 for 9 and going against an outstanding Bills defense this week, I would say sit Julian Edelman. And what I was talking about earlier, just a quick note for you guys, is John Harbaugh has already said that if they have the number 1 seed locked up, that he will sit all of his starters in week 17 for Baltimore. That said, if the Patriots lose to Buffalo on Saturday, the Baltimore automatically clinches the number 1 seed. So beware that you may not have Lamar Jackson either for the game or for the whole game if that happens, because they may sit him for both games and not just the final game. So be careful what happens with the Patriots tomorrow when you're looking for what Baltimore players you're going to start on Sunday.
So there you go, you guys. Keep an eye out for what happens on Saturday to determine whether or not you guys need to start Lamar Jackson on Sunday, or if you need to pick your backup QB to start instead. Well, you guys, that's a wrap for us here for this week. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at TheNFLGirl320. Dominic, where can they follow you?
You can follow me at EnvisionFF.
You can read more of my thoughts on SheKnowsProFootball.com. Dominic, where can they read your work?
You can read my work at FantasyHotRead.com as well as RotoBaller.com and Razzball.com.
That's all our time, you guys. See you back here next week.